Well, folks, this is show 3, Sons of Fire, Creation 1, 2, from the book of Creation. And Sons of Fire has a very special significance for me. So, Dan, give our viewers out there just a quick look ahead at what we're going to talk about in this show.
All right. There are very important concepts in this particular verse, Creation 1, 2. First is what comes first, God, man, or creation? And secondly, the original source for this knowledge. When ancient Egyptian scribes first penned the book of creation, they struggled with the question that has always intrigued us. What came first? And is that knowable to us? The answer came down from a much older race, according to this passage, from a Middle Eastern naval trading empire that was destroyed by the Romans long ago.
Well, I really enjoy this passage. It has very deep and special meanings to me. So with that, I'm going to read Creation 1, 2.
Okay.
There are no true beginnings on earth, for here all is effect, the ultimate cause being elsewhere. For who among men can say which came first, the seed or the plant? Yet in truth it is neither, for something neither seed nor plant preceded both, and that thing was also preceded by something else. Always there are ancestors back to the beginning, and back beyond that there is only God. This, then, is how these things were told in the great book of the Sons of Fire. Well, Dan, are you ready for Sons of Fire?
I am. It's exciting.
Good. Then let's get right into it with Creation 1, 2, 1. There are no true beginnings on earth, for here all is effect, the ultimate cause being elsewhere.
As scientists, we can understand how the earth was formed and how it began. But this verse is saying that this was not the true beginning. We can't see cold, but we can see frost on the windows when cold is present. The earth is here because God is here. If he were not here, there would be no earth. There's a great written work called the Zohar, compiled by Rab Shimon of all the mystical knowledge of sages throughout the ages. It teaches that the universe and everything we touch, feel, and see is but 1% of all that is. God is the other 99%. I believe this reflects what this verse is trying to say here, the cause being greater than the effect.
Well, I find it very interesting that God is 99%, but for the reasons that is stated in the Zohar, not necessarily those of science. And we're going to get into that. But first, let's jump ahead into Creation 1, 2, 2. For who among men can say which came first, the seed or the plant?
It's simple, folks. We just weren't there to watch these things unfold. We can study and theorize and argue conclusions, but in truth, there is something much greater at work behind the scenes, what I call the 99%, or what we call God.
Yes, behind the scenes, behind the curtains, behind the throne. And inevitably, real power emanates from behind something else. Isn't that
That's
the case? True. Yes, it's interesting. Let's jump into Creation 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 4, because you did these together. Yet in truth, it is neither, for something neither seed nor plant preceded both, and that thing was also preceded by something else. Always there are ancestors back to the beginning, and back beyond that there is only God.
God did not generate directly from himself the plant or seed. There were generations of creations that occurred chronologically to get to the plant or seed. God separated a special part of himself to become all that we touch, feel, and see according to a set of universal laws that he defined. He created spiritual beings to oversee and manage the creation of material things. And the generations of these spiritual beings can be long and prolific, enough so to spangle an entire universe with manifestations of creation. Regardless of what was in between, God started it all in motion to get to where we are now.
I agree with that completely. I agree with that. And now let's go into creation 1-5. This then is how these things were told in the great book of the sons of fire.
Fragments of the books of the Sons of Fire is actually a part of the Kolbrin. Much of these great works have been hidden from the general public by repressive regimes because this information was considered to be privileged, reserved for priests and kings. But Marshall, this is a very special topic for you. Would you like to comment on the Sons of Fire?
Yes, and the thing about the Sons of Fire is I did a lot of work on this back in 2004 and 2005 with a gentleman by the name of Glenn Kimball. And Glenn was a brilliant Kolbrin researcher. I really enjoyed working with him. He passed on. That's a sad loss. But what Glenn was able to determine was that the reason why we even have the Kolbrin Bible today was because of the Phoenicians. They were phenomenal mariners. They were ahead of everybody else. They were the first civilization in the Middle East or in the known world at that time who navigated by the stars. Everyone else would follow the coastlines, which was a long, laborious trip. So because they navigated and had wonderful ships, the Phoenicians not only traded throughout the entire Mediterranean, but their trading routes also extended to the Horn of Africa and to Great Britain to the north. And the Kolbrin Bible was originally translated from ancient hieroglyphics into Phoenician. And that's important because the Phoenician alphabet, which is 22 letters, is the basis of the English alphabet. And so that really set things in motion. I think that the Sons of Fire, which is a book in the Kolbrin Bible, could very well be the last remaining published folklore of the ancient Phoenician culture. But you also did some research on this yourself, so why don't you share that with us?
I'd love to. This race was originally called Umuru. In its earliest form and settled the oldest known human city of Gabel in 7000 BC, later called Byblos in the Middle East. And that's a long time ago. That's 9,000 years ago of history of this race.
That's right.
In time, this growing race came to be known the Amorites or the Amalekites. These were a Semitic-speaking people and carried with them the cuneiform written language from their forefathers. Between 1100 BC and 800 BC, during the times of the Trojans and the downfall of the city of Troy, these Canaanites had become an expansive race and very prosperous in trade and large fleets of ships, just like you were talking about. They were the merchants of the Mediterranean.
Absolutely.
They were masters of the Mediterranean Sea, and as such, collected many teaching from the surrounding countries, as you can imagine, especially with all of those people that came aboard, the stories that they might have heard. To the Greeks, these merchants were called the Phoenicians, and that's where they became Phoenicia or Phoenicians. Today, what we call the Fertile Crescent is defined by the well-developed trade routes of the Phoenicians in circa 3000 BC. And the city of Carthage was their greatest stronghold in the country of Tunisia before the Romans destroyed their city and sold them off to be slaves in 146 BC.
The Romans were, if anything, predictable.
Yes, they were. Iron fist.
You know, whoa. Yeah, definitely not warm, loving, and compassionate. That's for sure. I think that I am really grateful to the Phoenicians because we wouldn't have anything of this, which was originally in its first incarnation by the ancient Egyptians, was called the Great Book. And the Great Book was great. It was the size of like a 20-volume encyclopedia. Unfortunately, when the Library of Alexandria was burned and sacked, that was the end of that, except for what the Phoenicians had actually translated into their own language and taken to Great Britain, where it was adopted by the Celts. And the Celts loved it. And interestingly enough, the Romans, who, after they conquered England, the noblemen and the military leaders, their children were taught from these passages from the Great Book, which we now call the Kolbrin Bible. Quite amazing. So with that, next up is the God question. At the end of this show and all the other subsequent shows, we will address our God question. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with how to do readings, please go back and watch the first show of this series. It'll explain it to you. And these readings are being provided solely as a reference. And with that, Dan, what is the God question for this show?
Well, it comes from creation 1, 2, and 4. And I think we'd like to ask tonight, God, were the ancestors of humanity other sentient species before us?
Oh, that's a good question. I like that. I'm interested in finding out the answer to that.
I am too.
Yeah.
It'll be very interesting to hear that next week.
That's right. Now, in the meantime, from our previous show, you had a question which was, God, what is the greatest challenge you face in revealing yourself to humans? So I am now going to give you what I got in that reading.
Looking forward to it. God, what is the greatest challenge that you face in revealing yourself to humans?
Disbelief that makes the mind a closed vessel, impenetrable to love and sensations of life force energy within the soul of those who've incarnated without a path or assistance in connecting with creation, nor the spiritual comfort that comes from connection. I think something in this reading that really resonates with me is that the mind is a closed vessel. It's a container.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we're doing readings with the other side across the veil, with the light entities, they never use the term vessel to describe us as a whole, as a complete being. Rather, they use the term vehicle, because a vessel, like a vase, is something where you have to set it somewhere, dust it, and take care of it, which means you got to pay somebody to do it or find the time to do it yourself. And that undermines the nature of why we incarnate, which is why the other side refers to us as vehicles, because a vehicle is a vessel with wheels, baby. Da-da, 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 da-da. We hit the road, we go learn creation. That's why we're here, right?
That's right. That's right.
Absolutely. And if we're not doing that, well, then as we talk about in our next show, show 4, where we are doing the passages creation 1, 3, and 1, 4, the title is Brooding in Profound Silence. And if there's something a closed mind will do, that seems to resonate with me. Dan, give us a look ahead at the next show.
As science explores deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, there's a truth that keeps popping up that they just don't want to talk about. that of a spiritual absolute upon which the entire universe is constructed.
Oh, that's going to be interesting.
It's
I'll
going to be
see.
good.
Yeah, well, see you there.
I'll see you there.